Hi, everyone. I'm Matt from Matt Lenhart Coaching. I'm a financial coach, which means I help people with personal finance topics and usually things that affect them day to day, like bank accounts, credit cards, trying to save money, trying to pay off debt, how to handle loans, things like that. But I specialize in helping people create and maintain a budget. And so I thought for the first video on my channel, I would answer a really basic question, which is what is a budget? The word budget gets thrown around a lot, and it's usually in a negative way, like you're on a budget, so you can't spend money. And sometimes that could be true. If you are someone who overspends a lot, you may seek out a budget as a way to help curb that and maybe try to save a little more money than you spend. But that's not necessarily what a budget is. It's really just a plan for spending your money. That's the answer to the question. A budget is just a plan, and it really focuses on the when. You're going to spend your money. All the money you make, eventually you're going to spend it, and a budget just helps you figure out when you're going to spend it. So it could be next week if you have to buy some groceries. It could be 30 years from now when you're going to start spending it in retirement, or potentially you're going to hand it off to a member of your family or something like that. So the little diagram I put together here, we're going to look at the little piggy bank as our money, and it's going to show what a budget tries to capture, and really the all the different types of spend that we have, and then a budget is trying to capture it all together in one place. So on the left side, we have the most common type of spending, which is our regular or monthly spending, and this is really going to be things like the short term or even immediate purchases that we're going to make, things like our groceries, our utilities, our housing payment, anything we do throughout the month for fun, like go to movies, buy books, buy toys, whatever it is we need to get through the month, or not necessarily need to get through the month, but we want during the month. And then any other obligations we have, loan payments, whatever the case may be. These are just the things that come up all the time. They're fresh in our mind because we pay them very consistently. And most people do a pretty good job on this. They can usually remember the things they have to pay every month. Maybe not every single thing, but usually we can remember our monthly obligations. In the middle here, we have probably the most difficult part of our spending, which are irregular and non-monthly. And these are things like annual memberships that we might have or renewals for something. And maybe most of the time we can remember those, but it is difficult because we only pay them once a year. So sometimes they can, leave our mind. And when they come up, we say, oh, shoot, I forgot about that. But they also cover things like holiday spending, things that do come up during the year, not necessarily just holidays, but birthdays or weddings or baby showers, things that maybe we didn't really expect to happen. Maybe we have a new niece or nephew coming into the world, and we're going to have a baby shower. We weren't expecting that. Things like car repairs or vet bills or medical bills, things that we're not really anticipating, but we probably know they could happen. But it's usually things like that that pop up when we least expect it and really throw us for a loop. And so a budget tries to capture those things as well. And then finally, on the right, we have the fun part of budgeting, which is to think about the future and the goals that we want to achieve with our money. I mean, we're working or we're trying to earn money for a lot of our lives, and we want to do something with that. We don't just want to pay our bills and pay for fixing our car or our house. We want to do something with that money that brings us joy. So that's where the goals come into play. We want to think about our long-term future spending, whether that's retirement, getting going on a vacation, getting a new car so we don't have to keep repairing the old one, paying for college expenses for one of our kids. Anything you can think of that's a serious goal for you, a fun goal, or maybe a not so fun but important goal, like having an emergency fund or having money set aside if someone were to lose a job or if you did have a medical expense. Anything like that can be a goal. So it's not necessarily like a dream. It can be just I want to make sure the next time something comes up in my life that I have the money set aside to pay for it. So whatever your goals may be, those are totally personal, but a budget is trying to capture all three of these things and plotting out how you plan to spend your money, whether it's really soon in the current month, whether it's during the year at some point, sometime we don't know, or farther in the future for a longer term goal. So the benefits of this are maybe obvious, but one of the benefits is that you're making sure that your spending is going to align with your priorities. And so this answers the question, how do I want to spend my money? And this, if you think about it, this is making sure that your plan, by planning out how you're going to spend your money, you can make sure that you're at least trying to put it toward the things that you really want and the things you really enjoy. Sometimes when we're not thinking about this, when we don't plan it out, we're just spending money as it comes up. And maybe at the end of the month, we look back, or maybe at the end of the year, and we think, did I spend my money the way I wanted to? And maybe we didn't, but we didn't plan it out in advance. So there's nothing we can really do about it. So when you plan ahead of time and you think, okay, I have my money in my bank account right now, what's my plan for using this? We can at least try to get ahead and make sure that we're at least thinking about trying to spend that for things that are really important to us. Another benefit of having a budget is that it can give you the freedom to spend guilt-free. So this is answering the question, can I spend my money? So when you're, in a mall or out somewhere and you're thinking about making a purchase, or even if you're online and you're just thinking about, oh, I think I really want this. Uh, if you don't have a budget, sometimes you just make that decision and you don't necessarily know if you really have that money set aside or if you're giving something else up. But when you have a budget, you can just look at the budget and say, yes, I have that money set aside, or no, I don't, and I'm going to have to take money from something else to pay for it. And do I want to do that? So when you have that feeling of, yeah, I have the money, that's a great feeling. And this gets even better sometimes when it's one of those unexpected expenses that you weren't planning, well, not that you weren't planning for, you were planning in a budget, but you just weren't expecting it to come up right now. And you say, wow, I actually have that money set aside. And even though I don't like spending this, I'm glad that I have it. And it feels good. It feels good that you planned ahead and you had that money available. So that's a really important part of having a budget. And one of the last things here is that it gives you clarity on where your money is going. So we are planning a certain way of spending our money, but a budget, because we're entering all of our transactions and we're reviewing those, it also lets us know where the money actually went. Then did it align with our plan? Did we plan out a certain way and the way we spent our money went along with that, or did it go in a different way and maybe we need to adjust our plan? So this is answering the question, where am I spending my money? And it's really important because, again, when we don't have a budget, oftentimes we can't really keep track of where the money's going. When we do, we hope it's according to our plan, but life doesn't always go that way. So it could go in a different direction. So the important thing here is budgets aren't focused on cutting back your spending and saying, I'm having a budget because I don't want to spend any money. It's not about saving all the money you can. It's just figuring out when you're going to spend that money. Can you spend it tomorrow? Do you have to wait a few months? Is it next year or is it in the future? Those are the things we're trying to do when we have a budget. So I have a couple examples here too. They might be a little bit contrived, but they're just trying to illustrate some common scenarios that come up that that a budget can help with. So in the first example here, we have Katie, and these are all just fictional people, I promise. So Katie's been saving every month to get a new backpack. So she's putting some money aside, which is great. And now she finally has $80, which she thinks is a little bit more than she's going to need. Based on what she's been looking at, this will cover the backpacks that she has in mind. So she goes out to the mall to make her purchase. But while she's there looking at the backpack, she notices a pair of shoes, and the shoes are catching her eye, and she's thinking, I think I really want these instead of the backpack. But the problem is the shoes are $150. So they're quite a bit above what she had saved. But she really thinks these are the one. She has to have them. So in this example, she's going to just pull up her phone, the app for her bank, and look at her checking account. And there's a balance of $515.72. Not to be too specific, but she says, "Okay, that's great. That's much more than the 150 I need. So we're good." So she buys the shoes, she throws the backpack in the restock bin, and she's on her way. But a couple hours later, she thinks, I'm not so sure now. I don't know if I really should have done that. Maybe I should have just stuck with the backpack. But she's not sure if she did the right thing or not. But again, it's just kind of a simple example, but it is a very common thing that comes up. It's people struggle when they don't have a budget or they don't have a way of really knowing exactly where all their money needs to go. When they're in that heat of the moment of making a purchase decision, they don't necessarily know if they truly have enough money to make that purchase, or if they're or what they're going to give up if they don't. If you pull up your banking app, like Katie did in this example, yes, your checking account might say you have more than you need to make the purchase, and that's great, but that's not accounting for bills you have to pay or anything in the future that you might have to use that money for. So, yeah, you might have enough cash right now to buy it, but does that mean you really can afford that purchase right now? That's the question you need to answer, but without a budget, it's very difficult to do that. So some may not even do that. They may not even pull up their banking app. They might just take a credit card out and make the purchase. And if they don't have enough money, then that starts to lead to credit card debt piling up. And then you start paying interest on that. And then everyone knows how it goes from there. So the point is here that without having a budget or some sort of a plan for your money, Katie's just making this decision in a total vacuum. You're just, you're looking at how much money you may have in your bank account. You're not even thinking about it and just saying, well, I had 80, but it's only 70 more, no problem. You want the shoes more than the backpack. You're not really making all the considerations you need to decide whether to spend that extra 70. And keep in mind that it's not always $70. Sometimes it's hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands of dollars. There's all different levels of purchases here. This is a simple day-to-day one. But there are other things that happen. Buying a car sometimes, can you really afford that, monthly payment or whatever it is? Sometimes those big decisions come into play as well. So budget attempts to confront the spender with reality when they're making that purchase. So it says, this is what you have set aside for the specific thing that you want. Or maybe you don't have anything set aside. Maybe you haven't really planned for this purchase at all. But then in addition to just seeing if you have money set aside for it, it's also presenting you with all the other things that you had planned to use your money for. And so it's making you decide, do I want to take money from something else to make this purchase? Is it worth that much to me that I'm willing to take money from elsewhere to make this purchase? Or do I feel like, no, I set that money aside for a reason. I want to do these other things. And so I really shouldn't do this. So it doesn't always work. You're not always going to make the decision where you don't spend extra money. That's not really what it's meant to do. It's just meant to force you into a conscious decision. So instead of just saying, yes, I really want this, I'm going to buy it, you say, yes, I really want this. And yes, I'm willing to give up this other thing that I wanted, or no, I'm not willing to give up this other thing. That's what a budget is trying to do in this situation. So this screenshot here is from an app called YNAB, also known as You Need a Budget. And this is what I use for budgeting and what I coach on for most of my clients. And this is just an example. You can use anything. You don't have to use a tool like this. You can use a spreadsheet. It can do some of this. It might be a little more work for you, but it can do something very similar here. But this is showing what it might look like if Katie were to open it when she's about to make this purchase. And it's going to show all of these different spending areas that she was planning on and how much money she has available in them. And so in this case, we're looking at the backpack specifically, and she can see I set aside $80 for that. But if I'm thinking of buying the shoes, I don't have the $149. I only have 80. So the next step is that she can see she doesn't have enough. So her next step is then looking at these other spending categories and deciding if she wants to take money from those to fund the overspending for the shoes. So she could start by looking at her goals, which are to go on a vacation, maybe to pay for additional education, do some home improvements. And she can think about whether she's willing to give up some money in any of those to pay for these shoes. And she might say, no, I'm not. So she could then also look at some of her other more day-to-day expenses or kind of discretionary expenses like hobbies, the gym, and any kind of entertainment she does during the month. And she can think if she wants to take money from those and, maybe she says, well, yeah, I have, hobbies that I do. I paint or whatever it is. And I'm willing to give up that $50. I can give that up for the shoes, but I'm going to have to figure out another 20. So maybe I'll take from my entertainment as well. And I'll just cut back for the rest of the month and I'll buy the shoes. That's a plausible scenario there. But regardless, it's just confronting you with this decision. That's the important part of what the budget is doing here. Instead of just looking at, do I have enough in my bank account? You're looking holistically at everything you were planning on spending and going from there. In addition, you might look at the very bottom there and also realize that Katie has a couple of credit cards and she has some money set aside to make the payments, but it's not her full balance. You can see the full balance on the left side of this screenshot, and it's not enough to cover that. So she might also be thinking, maybe I want to make sure that I'm not increasing this amount that I owe on my credit cards. I want to try to eventually pay these off, and spending the extra 70 here is not going to help with that. So again, it depends on the spender's priorities, but these are all the decisions that are going to go through your mind when you have a budget rather than just what's my bank say. So the second example here, we have Billy. So Billy feels like he's having a great year when it comes to finances. He's been covering all his monthly expenses without adding anything to his credit card balances. He's been putting money aside every single month so he can go on a vacation to the Caribbean. And he's been thinking about this trip for a decade. So he's really happy with how things have been going. So as we get toward the end of the year, he realizes he's saved enough to go on this trip, and he decides to take it because he's finally saved up enough. He's been waiting for so long. So he's on his way. After his first night there, he gets a call from a family member who he asks to check on his house and finds out that there's a major leak in his bathroom. So it was awful. So it's definitely not something he was anticipating, and he's already spent the money for his vacation. So he's really stressing now. When he gets home, he calls for a few estimates and realizes that the costs are going to be over $3,000 just to fix the leak. And then he's probably going to have more costs to fix any holes the plumbers need to put in the walls, whatever else happens. And he's just crushed. He hasn't planned for this. He just spent a lot of money on this vacation that he's been saving up for. And so he has no option but to put the repairs on his credit card. It's the only way he can pay for them. So again, this is a situation that comes up, maybe not this exact situation, but these unexpected expenses do come up, and they're not usually when we're like, yes, I have money set aside. This is great. Let me just let me just write you the check. That's usually not the way it works. It's usually when we're, potentially the worst possible time for them to happen. But we know they happen. They aren't totally unpredictable. These things do happen. But a lot of times what happens is it's so easy to focus on monthly payments because we pay them so often, like we talked about before, and because everything in our life is presented to us as a monthly payment. When you go to buy a car, the focus is always on a monthly payment. Unless you're coming in with a briefcase of cash or you have a big check that you can write, no problem, you're always looking at how much is it going to cost every month. And you're making your decision on, can I afford that much per month? I'll just decide that way. But all of our subscriptions are usually monthly. Our utilities are monthly. Even the simplest purchases we make now, you can go out to Target and make a purchase, and there's an option to switch it to a monthly payment. Even, a $25 purchase can be a monthly payment if you want it to be. So they happen so consistently, and we're seeing them all the time that we often only think about these monthly payments, and it's easy to forget about these longer term or irregular payments that we have to make. So in this case with Billy, something like a major leak happening, that's not something that you're really thinking about during the year. Nobody's like, oh, my toilet or my sink might leak tomorrow. Um, so they often hit when we're not prepared, and they can totally throw off everything we've done. So in this case for Billy, all the hard work he's done throughout the year is down the drain. Not to use a pun, but I mean it really is in the case of spending all that money for a vacation and then having this huge expense when you get back. But we have to remember these are predictable. You can predict that you probably, if you own a house, you're going to fix things. It's inevitable, and you're probably going to do it much more frequently than you like. So they will happen. We just aren't sure exactly when. But when they do happen, they're probably going to cost a good bit. So again, a budget helps you try to mitigate this by treating things like an unexpected repair as though it's a monthly payment. So you're not paying anything necessarily or spending the money every month, but you are trying to set it aside each month. So it's almost like it is a monthly payment. When you get your paycheck, you're going to put it toward your monthly expenses, your monthly obligations, but then you're also going to try to put it toward non-monthly and even future goal type expenses that you plan in the future, but putting a little bit aside every month to prepare for those. And this can be a lot of areas. We talked about medical bills before. These can be like your insurance deductibles. Do you have your insurance deductible set aside if you had to make a claim? Do you just have 500 or $1,000 sitting around for that? Maybe not. And if not, you should maybe think about putting a little bit every month toward that just in case. Holidays are a big one. Again, birthdays, showers, other holidays, if you're buying gifts for people or you're decorating or whatever it is that you like to do during those times, then those are going to come up every year. They're not unpredictable. They're coming. So that's another thing you might treat as a monthly payment. You're going to put a little aside to prepare for that toward whenever, the end of the year, the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, whenever these things happen for you, you're putting a little money aside for those so that you're ready. And it doesn't come up as, oh, I forgot I got to buy a bunch of gifts. So all of these things you can think about as though they're a monthly payment. And so Billy was on the right track here. He's treating a vacation like a monthly payment, kind of putting a little bit aside throughout the year. It's just that he wasn't also putting money aside for uh, home repair expenses. So this screenshot here again is from YNAB. It's kind of it's similar to what we had just seen, but your budget should include all of these expenses. You might not get them all right when you get started. You might not capture every single expense you're ever going to have. But as long as you have most of them in here, and you can add more as time goes on, these are going to be side by side with all of your other expenses. So you're going to be every month or every paycheck that you receive, you're going to look at these and think about, okay, how much should I put aside for these if I have it available? If I've covered all my monthly obligations, what can I start putting toward my non-monthly expenses or my goals or my future? What can I think about is reasonable to put aside for those every month? Or maybe I don't have a certain amount. I just, if I have a little money left over, I'm going to start funding these other potential expenses that I could have. Okay, so hopefully these examples helped. Again, they don't cover everything that could happen, but they try to give a couple of ideas for scenarios you may have encountered in the past where you had to make a decision between buying something in the moment or something that came up unexpectedly during the year. So if you want to get started, if you're convinced, if this has convinced you that a budget is right for you and it's something that you need and maybe you aren't doing yet, then I have a couple steps here for how you can get started. And there's more to it than this. I'm actually going to make a video for each one of these steps. But this is just the overview of how you get started with the budget. So your first step is you're going to list all of your spending accounts and your current balances. So this is really important because the way a budget works is, at least the zero-based budget, which I think is the right way to budget, is you're looking at the money you have right now. You're not looking at a paycheck that's coming next week. You're looking at how much money do I have right at this very moment. And that's what you're budgeting. That's what you're planning out. And you might not have enough to cover everything in a month from the money you have today. And that's okay. You eventually you will get paid if you have a regular salary or a regular income. And when you get that, then you will proceed with budgeting whatever you can from there. But it's a very important for a budget to know how much money you have right this moment. So checking and savings, absolutely. Credit cards you want to capture as well because you're spending from them, not necessarily for the balance, but because you're spending money from them, and potentially even like your loans or any debt accounts that you have. You're not um, they're not going to count toward what you're budgeting necessarily, but they are good to capture in terms of how much you're paying off from month to month because they are an obligation. So that's step one. Sorry, that was a long step one, but you're basically just going to list out all the accounts that you have and check their current balances with your bank. You don't, again, nothing future, nothing that should happen. It's just what you have right now. Step number two is we're going to try to cover as many obligations as we can with that money. So we're going to think about all of the spending categories we have during, you can start with a month. Anything you need to pay to get through the month, including your essentials, groceries, clothing, anything else you need to spend to get through the month. Those are all considered obligations. It's basically if you had to cut down to the bare bones, what would you have to spend to get through that month. And that includes like loan payments, anything where you could get in trouble if you didn't pay for it. Those are your obligations. You need to capture those as spending categories. So you're going to try to get those first and see how far you can get with that money to cover those. And then you're going to think about your goals, and your goals are going to cover again like future like fun things like vacations, but they're also going to cover things like we talked about, emergencies. Maybe my goal is to pay off debt. Maybe my goal is to have money set aside for a home repair or a car repair or a medical bill, or anything else that might come up. Maybe a job loss. I want to cover all of those things. That's one of my goals. And then your goals cover everything else that you want to spend money on, things that you don't need to get through the month, but that you want. You like to read books, you like to play video games, whatever. These are my goals. These are they're more immediate. They're not. 20 years from now, retirement, or 5 years from now, vacation, but they are things that are important to me, that I spend maybe every month or every week. So step four is then going to be to prioritize all of these different things you come up with, your obligations and your goals or your wants. You're going to prioritize all of them. What are the most important things to you? And then you're going to set your spending targets accordingly. For things like obligations, a spending target is easy. It's just what the obligation is. Most of them are bills, and you know exactly how much you owe. But for other things, it's more of a personal choice. How much am I willing to spend every month on this, or every year on this? And you have to think about that. And sometimes your priorities can be your obligations. If you like to cook or you like to eat out, that can be a priority, even though it's something that you're going to spend every month no matter what, right? You have to buy food. But that could be one of your priorities. And then step five is the most important when it comes to a budget. You have to make it a habit. A budget doesn't just miraculously fix any issues you have with your finances or make you great at personal finance. It's just a tool. It's a great tool, but it's just a tool. You have to use it. So you need to check it regularly. You need to enter your transactions. And maybe most importantly, you need to use it when you're making a purchasing decision, similar to what we looked at with Katie in the store. When you're faced with those kind of decisions, you need to use the budget in that scenario. That's what makes it magical, if you will. That's the magic part. If you're using it when you make those decisions, it can significantly help whatever goals you're trying to achieve. So if you go through those 5 steps, that will get you started with the budget. But budgeting has a learning curve. It's not, you're not going to set up a budget and then it's just everything's great from then on. It does take time, and you can think of it as a very strong parallel to health and fitness. Tracking what you eat is a great way to work on health and fitness, but you have to use it. You have to consistently use it. There's a lot more that goes into it. You may want to do exercise, and sometimes that takes some time to learn. Budgeting is the same way. There's a learning curve to it. So don't get frustrated. Definitely stick with it. It might take a few months before it really clicks. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you are interested in using a software tool, because it can make this a lot easier, I would recommend trying YNAB. They give you a free trial for over a month. I think it's 34 days or something like that. So you can try it for an entire month and then also try it for a couple days after, which is one of the critical parts in a budget when you roll over to the next month and start planning out your spending for that month. So I think it's great. It's a free trial, so there's nothing to be lost. You can just give it a try and see if you like it. But you can find other software tools as well. There's other ways that you can do this. They do help. You can, of course, use a spreadsheet, but you do need to have the know-how to do that. And you need to make sure it's something you'll use consistently and it's not a chore to go in there and use that. So just make sure that whatever it is you're using, it's not going to deter you from budgeting. Um, go through your first month. If you can't get don't worry about getting the budget perfect your first month. It's not going to happen. And I can say that for a fact, it's not going to happen. So go through a month of entering your transactions and then review how that actual spending compared to what your perception was at the beginning. It probably will be a little bit different. I know it was for me. And then that just helps you make adjustments to your budget. And you'll always be making adjustments to your budget. Life doesn't stay the same. Things change all the time, and your budget will too. So don't feel like the way you make your budget when you start is how it will be forever. You will constantly change it. And if you need some help and you have questions or you just want someone to kind of guide you through it, you can book a coaching call. There's all the links for me are in the video description, so you can click those to schedule a call. And it can be something as simple as just an hour just to talk through questions you have, or if you want something a little more prescriptive, you can do that as well. Maybe a more step by step walking through all of this to create your budget, and then maybe get through the first month and check things when it rolls over. So definitely consider that if you prefer some more hands-on or back and forth help with that. If you feel like you can just go through a tutorial or just follow these steps, and that's great. So that's it for now. I hope this was helpful. I am going to make a video for each of the steps that I covered as far as creating a budget. I'll be making videos for some other things as well. So until the next one, have a good day.